You can listen to The Front on your smart speaker every morning. To hear the latest episode, just say, play the news from The Australian.
From The Australian, here's What's on the Front. I'm Kristen Amiet. It's Monday, June 24. Parliament will be back in session before the winter break this week, and the PM is planning on a political comeback. He'll focus on cost of living relief in the form of grocery prices, tax cuts and energy subsidies, as well as vaping reforms, in a bid to regain ground from the Coalition and the Greens. That story's live right now at theaustralian.com.au. A Westfield shopping centre in Adelaide was evacuated on Sunday afternoon after a fight broke out in a food court. South Australian police said two groups of young men were potentially armed when the clash occurred. The daughter of missing Lennox Head woman Bronwin Winfield didn't want her stepfather to know she'd made a formal statement to police about the night her mum vanished. Now, a podcast investigation by The Australian's national chief correspondent Hedley Thomas is shedding light on Chrystal's last memory of her mother. That's in today's episode. In 1999, Chrystal Winfield was boarding with a woman named Kerry McLean in the town of Ballina on the New South Wales north coast. Her stepfather, John, was working as a bricklayer in Sydney at the time and had taken Chrystal's younger sister, Lauren, down south with him. Chrystal's mother, Bronwyn, had vanished from the family home on Sandstone Crescent 6 years earlier, on the evening of Sunday, May 16, 1993. Bronwyn's mysterious disappearance is the subject of a podcast investigation by The Australian's national chief correspondent, Hedley Thomas. And revelations made in the latest episode have cast Chrystal's recollections of that night in a sinister new light. The episode, titled Did Judy See Bronwyn's Body?, is available for subscribers right now at bronwynpodcast.com. Kerry McLean plays a pivotal role in this latest episode. She connected Hedley with Judy Singh, a former neighbour of the Winfields, whose explosive account of what she saw on the night of May 16, 1993, was ignored by police until last week.
And this night I was sitting up and I saw the car pull out at the end of the street and the light was on in the car. There was very squeaky brakes on that car and he drove very slowly along the street, but he had left the car light on and I could see directly into the car. And I had a small lantern on the balcony rail and he kind of looked up this night and I saw this, what looked to be like a mummy in the back of the car.
Kerry McLean also opened her home up to a then 16-year-old Chrystal Winfield in the years after her mother vanished.
So those are two big coincidences, Kerry. One, that Chrystal is staying with you while police are investigating her mother's suspected murder.
Yep.
And two, that your friend who lives in the street witnessed something.
Yeah.
It was Kerry who took Chrystal to the nearby Ballina police station in 1999 to finally make a formal statement about what she remembered about the night her mother disappeared. Her words are being read by a voice actor.
I have attended the Ballina police station today again of my own free will. I've been very concerned about what has happened to my mother, and I would like the police to conduct a thorough investigation to try to find out what has happened to her.
Chrystal gave her statement to Detective Sergeant Glenn Taylor years after the fact because the initial investigation into her mother's disappearance was severely lacking.
I am prepared to do that, and I understand that the statement may be given to the coroner to assist in any further inquiry.
Chrystal says in her statement that she was at home on Sandstone Crescent with her mother and sister on the afternoon of May 16, 1993. They'd moved back in just days earlier after a stint in a townhouse on Byron Street. That's where they stayed after Bronwyn and John formally separated 2 months earlier in March. She says her stepfather, who she calls Dad, returned to Sandstone Crescent from Sydney at some stage that afternoon with a woman in tow. Chrystal didn't know her name and says she left pretty quickly. Heather Johnson asked in the podcast Facebook discussion group if we know who that woman was. You can find it and join the conversation by searching for Bronwyn Podcast Official Discussion Group on Facebook. We know from earlier episodes of Bronwyn that the woman was probably a friend of John Winfield's oldest daughter, Jodie, 22-year-old Becky Maguire. She said in her statement that John picked her up on his way to Sandstone Crescent on the Sunday afternoon. A voice actor is reading Becky's words.
John must have had a set of keys to the car because we then got into the car and he drove me home. John didn't go inside the house at all while I was in the house with him. While we were driving back to my house, John thanked me for coming with him and told me he was sorry for getting me involved.
Later in the evening, Chrystal remembers Bronwyn and John argued about unpaid bills.
I don't recall what was being said between Mum and Dad, but I could tell that they were arguing. I could hear them arguing until I must have fell asleep. My next recollection that night was being awoken by my father. Dad told me that he was taking Lauren and I to Sydney. I recall that we packed a small bag of clothes and got into the car.
Chrystal says her stepfather stopped to buy fuel at a petrol station near Lennox Head on their way out of town. And we know that's true because when he got to Sydney, John Winfield produced a receipt of payment timestamped at 11:06 p.m. on the 16th. What's not clear is exactly when Judy Singh saw John Winfield allegedly driving the family car with what she fears was Bronwyn Winfield's body wrapped in a sheet. He's never been charged and denies any wrongdoing. Coming up, how fresh eyes and ears turned this case around. Episode 7 of Bronwyn is live for subscribers right now at bronwynpodcast.com. And if you have any information about Bronwyn Winfield's disappearance, email Hedley Thomas at bronwyn@theaustralian.com.au. We'll be back after this break. Chrystal Winfield is still close with her sister Lauren. She has a relationship with her stepdad, John, too. Those connections are a big part of the reason she hasn't directly participated in Hedley Thomas's podcast investigation into her mother's 1993 disappearance. She said in her statement to police in 1999 that she doesn't know what happened to Bronwin Winfield or if her stepfather was involved. It wasn't something the trio discussed.
I have not had any contact with my mother since her disappearance in 1993. Over the years, I have often thought about what has happened to her. Dad has never brought up my mother in conversation. Basically, over the years, my mother has gradually been built out of our lives. My dad never talks about Mum or his past relationship with her. I have never tried to bring up Mum in conversation with my father. I am aware that he does not like to talk about her. I am very concerned about what has happened to my mother, and that is why I have attended the police station today to speak to the police.
It's a heartbreaking statement, and it took a lot of courage for this teenage girl to go into a police station and offer a statement about her concerns about her mother's disappearance.
Matthew Condon is a senior reporter with The Australian.
And then in the statement to Detective Glenn Taylor, she stated very clearly, I would prefer if you don't tell my father that I was here and that I made this statement. Now, why could that be? Clearly, the concern she had for her mother overrode, I guess, any sensibilities she might have had at the time in terms of worrying about whether she was doing the right thing or not. From her point of view, it was important. She went to the police to offer her assistance, and she also went, as the statement says, to urge them to the fullest extent to reinvestigate her mother's disappearance. So she was 10 when her mum disappeared. 6 years later, she made the decision that she would urge the police to forcefully reinvestigate what happened to her mum. She needed answers.
When Chrystal Winfield attended Ballina Police Station to make a formal statement in 1999, she implored Detective Sergeant Glenn Taylor to conduct a thorough investigation into her mother's disappearance. The veteran former homicide cop had reinitiated the investigation a year earlier after a visit from Bronwin Winfield's brother, Andy Reid, and his wife, Michelle. Here's how they described it to Hedley Thomas in the first episode of Bronwyn.
Andrew Reid and Michelle Reid came to see myself and another detective in Ballina and said, look, can we have some fresh eyes look at this? We're just not happy that this is going to be left as a missing person. We think there's more to it, and it was abundantly clear very early in the initial reinvestigation that it needed a lot more work done and then a lot of formal statements.
The initial investigation, from what we've learned, certainly from witnesses that have come forward and people interviewed on the podcast, is that there seemed to be, from the police perspective, that the story of the husband, in this case John Winfield, was largely accepted, and that Bronwin Winfield was deemed quite literally a missing person. There's a significant leap from being a missing person to a potential homicide victim. But as Glenn Taylor said to me only this week, that a dozen red flags presented themselves to him and just leapt off the pages. But I've spoken to police friends and retired police colleagues who have said to me that this is a generalisation, I know, but they will agree now as retired officers that the attitudes in general were lax, that not just in this instance, but in many instances, shortcuts were taken out of sight, out of mind. So, look, you know, without criticising other generations of police officers and their work, we can say that a set of fresh eyes can be critical. And fortunately, in this case, Glenn Taylor, a diligent detective in his day, saw it for what it was. But yet again, after that 1998-99 reinvestigation, it went into the hands of the coroner, and then it was up to the DPP, and thus remained inert for 31 years.
Within hours of episode 7 going live for subscribers, New South Wales Police got in touch with the Australian's national crime correspondent, David Murray. After all these years, they wanted to speak to Judy Singh about what she believes she saw that night. You're a seasoned podcaster, Matt, and you've known Hedley for a really long time. Why do you think this medium is so effective in moving these cold case investigations forward?
Well, firstly, I mean, I covered the trial of Christopher Dawson and his case, which of course stemmed out of Hedley Thomas's The Teacher's Pet. We come now to Bronwyn and we see, again, fresh information arising out of a podcast investigation to which the police have reacted, to their credit, immediately, to certainly the witness Judy Singh and what she alleges she saw on the night that Bronwyn disappeared. We can be thankful that happened. In that a podcast, pretty much unlike any other component of the media as a platform, can reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people very, very quickly. The information coming out of Bronwyn and accurately reported was that the initial investigation into Bronwyn could have been better, a lot better. And now with a fresh witness coming forward with this startling information that had never entered the Bronwin Winfield missing persons file, courtesy of the power of the podcast. I mean, you know, Hedley Thomas is an extraordinary podcaster. He lends his investigative talents now to this amazing medium, and we're seeing in real time the results of that.
Matthew Condon is a senior reporter with The Australian. For all the latest updates on Hedley Thomas's cold case investigation, go to theaustralian.com.au.